September 7th, 1996. Las Vegas, Nevada. The MGM Grand pulses with neon and adrenaline. Tyson has just destroyed Bruce Seldon in the first round, the fight over in less than 2 minutes. The roar of the crowd still echoes through the casino, spilling into the lobby with 1,000 conversations at once. People are buzzing, laughing, retelling the knockout like they just witnessed history. Among them walks Tupac Shakur. His presence cuts through the chaos like a spotlight. He moves fast, his silk shirt flowing, gold chains bouncing with each step. He smiles, flashes of teeth under the casino lights, laughing loud enough for cameras to catch. He looks like a man in full control, confident, untouchable, electric. But in the background, danger is waiting. Near the lobby, a group of men gather, among them Orlando Anderson, a Southside Crip rumored to have robbed a death row associate earlier that year. Tupac sees him. The energy shifts. His smile hardens into a glare. Without hesitation, he lunges forward. A fist flies, then another. Tupac kicks hard, his crew piling in behind him. The casino explodes into chaos. Tourists scatter. Security rushes in, bodies slamming against slot machines, the neon glow flickering over the melee. For a brief moment, the MGM feels less like a palace of entertainment and more like a battlefield. The fight is broken up within minutes, but the damage is already done. This isn't just another scuffle. It's a spark, and sparks in Tupac's world don't fade, they ignite. Hours later, Las Vegas will fall silent, the Strip transformed into a crime scene. Welcome to part 2 of the Tupac Shakur story. This is more than music. This is a story of struggle, survival, and legacy. Every beat carries a memory, every lyric, a confession. From the streets to the stage, from the cell to the spotlight, these are the untold chapters behind the icons. Welcome to the Hip Hop Files podcast. October 12th, 1995. The gates of Clinton Correctional Facility in upstate New York slide open, and a different kind of circus waits outside. Reporters jostle for position, microphones raised, cameras aimed. The autumn air is crisp, but the energy is feverish. Out steps Tupac Shakur. He looks thinner than the last time the public saw him, but his presence hasn't diminished. If anything, it has sharpened. His eyes dart from side to side, taking in the swarm of journalists. They shout his name, begging for a quote, but Tupac barely answers. He is free, but he doesn't look free. Behind him towers Marion Suge Knight. At 6'4", dressed in a blood-red suit, Suge radiates power. He isn't smiling for the cameras out of politeness. He's smiling because he knows what this moment means. He has just pulled off one of the boldest moves in music industry history. Suge has paid $1.4 million to bail Tupac out of prison. In return, Tupac has signed with Death Row Records. It's more than a contract, it's a lifeline. Tupac had been drowning in legal fees, facing years behind bars, unsure if his career could survive. Now, thanks to Suge, he has a second chance. But second chances in Suge Knight's world always come with a price. Death Row Records isn't just a label. By 1995, it's an empire. Feared, respected, envied. It has Dr. Dre, who gave the world the Chronic. It has Snoop Dogg, fresh off Doggy Style. It has Thaw Dog Pound, riding the wave of G-Funk dominance. And now, it has Tupac Shakur, an artist with the charisma of a movie star, the rage of a revolutionary, and the scars of a survivor. But Death Row is also chaos. The label's offices in Los Angeles aren't just studios. They're fortresses. Part hangout, part war room. Gang members linger in hallways. Security guards are built like linebackers. Loyalty is demanded, fear is currency, and Suge Knight sits on the throne. For Tupac, joining death row feels like freedom. After nearly a year in prison, after nights spent writing letters where he described himself as caged and forgotten, this feels like resurrection. But he knows the deal he's made. Suge Knight didn't spend $1.4 million out of charity. He bought Tupac's freedom, and in doing so, he bought his loyalty, his music, and his image. Tupac leaves Clinton Correctional Facility not as a man going home, but as a soldier walking into a new kind of battlefield. Suge Knight explains.
Because Interscope didn't want Pac anymore. They was giving me Pac contract because they didn't want Pac no more. He was too much for them. I used to walk in the motherfucking office and call them all motherfucking the devils, and they didn't do nothing for him when he was in prison. They didn't help him. So he was done with them. They gave me his contract. So I had to give Pac a new contract. The reason why I gave Pac a new contract, because on Interscope, Pac probably was getting, after he paid everybody, 6 or 7 points. 1 point on a million records is like $80,000. I gave Pac $1 and then start getting $2. So if Pac sold a million records on Interscope, he probably would have made $600,000, maybe $500,000 to $600,000. If he sold a million records with me, he'd have made, $2 million. Big difference.
The ink on Tupac's death row contract was barely dry before he threw himself headfirst into the studio. If prison had caged him, music became his release valve, and he treated every moment with the urgency of a man racing against fate. Los Angeles nights blurred into mornings inside death row studios. The energy was manic, relentless. Tupac worked like a man possessed. Engineers remembered him storming into the booth, scribbling lyrics on scraps of paper, rapping entire verses in a single take, then tossing the crumpled notes aside as he moved on to the next track without pause. There was no hesitation, no endless retakes. Tupac seemed convinced time was chasing him, and he had to outrun it with music. He was recording not just to make songs, but to leave behind a mountain of work, a catalog that could outlive him. In just 2 weeks, he recorded enough material for a double album. The result was All Eyes on Me, released in February 1996. It wasn't just another rap record. It was a landmark. 27 tracks, sprawling across 2 discs, dripping with ambition, defiance, swagger, and prophecy. It was the first double-disc hip-hop album in history. A statement of scale and dominance. The songs were instant anthems. California Love, his collaboration with Dr. Dre, was more than a hit. It was a West Coast victory parade, its music video a Mad Max fantasy that painted Tupac as larger than life. Ambitions as a Writer roared with menace, introducing listeners to the defiant outlaw persona he had embraced. How Do You Want It climbed the charts with brash seduction. And then there was I Ain't Mad at Ya, a reflective, almost haunting track that sounded eerily like a farewell. All Eyes on Me wasn't just music. It was a declaration of Tupac's rebirth. Prison hadn't broken him. Betrayals hadn't silenced him. Bullets hadn't killed him. He was back, louder, bigger, and more untouchable than ever. Within months, the album went multi-platinum. Death Row had the most powerful voice in rap. Tupac was its crown prince, its general, its weapon. But with the success came the lifestyle. Death Row was not just a label, it was a kingdom. and Suge Knight was its king. Tupac, as his most prized soldier, was showered with riches. Rolex watches, Bentleys, mansions in the hills. Suge gave him everything he wanted: cars, women, parties, protection. But protection under Suge came with strings. Death Row's offices became as dangerous as they were glamorous. Bodyguards doubled as gang members. Associates were as quick to pull out guns as they were to pass a blunt. Lawyers mixed with hustlers, producers mixed with muscle. Inside that world, Tupac thrived, and yet he also drowned. He became louder, wilder, more reckless. If prison had given him reflection, freedom gave him frenzy. He recorded endlessly, partied endlessly, fought endlessly. It was a life on overdrive, and it was only going to accelerate. Tupac had made his declaration. All Eyes on Me was more than music. It was proof that he was free, alive, and unstoppable. But the very things that made the album a triumph, the speed, the recklessness, the outlaw image, were also pushing him deeper into danger. Death Row artist, corrupt.
And then Daz need to get his props. Daz worked on the first record that Tupac did when he came home, Ambitions of a Rider. I won't deny it, I'm a straight rider. You know, that's Daz and Superfly. Soon as he came home, Suge already knew. First person I'm gonna put him with is Daz. Boom. He knew. Daz had the formula for Tupac's sound, what he wanted Tupac. He said, you know what, Tupac's home. Daz was the first one to be in there with him and lay that magic. And the first record they made was Ambitions of a Rider. Boom. After that record, Tupac went on fire when he heard the magic he could make with this Death Row team, starting with Daz. You know what I'm saying? Yep. And it was right up his alley because he was so upset about so many things, but he was so happy to be home. You know what I'm saying? So it was these mixed feelings and emotions. When Daz had dropped that motherfucking Ambitions of a Rider, he was able to, it just focused him. And he was like, oh, I'm home. Yeah, I'm home. Daz got the call. He went to the studio. Tupac went to the studio. They met there. Daz had Superfly come through. Everybody chopping it. Happy Pac is there. Daz is just working on the beat. Whoop-wop him and Superfly, thinking of a master plan, and then came up with the drums. And then after he finished the drums, Superfly came with the win, and then Daz had that whoop. I think it was Daz who put that in there. That was the whole beat before Superfly started adding the whams to it. And then Tupac lost his mind. He said, oh my God, what is this shit? This that thug shit. Jumped in that motherfucker and went nuts. Right, so Daz made it right on the spot, strictly for Tupac. Delmar gave his best, man. He hit Tupac with all different sides of Daz and Superfly, all parts of Daz. He hit him with Ambitions first, then he came with that's Scandalous, then he hit him with the I Got My Mind Made Up. I mean, he just hit him with all different sides of Daz, which is DPG. Those records you hear Tupac on is DPG shit. And he threw the thug in it. He threw that outlaw shit in it. It's a grand combination because we've been doing this since 93 with Tupac, because first thing we did was Poetic Justice. We got a slot on there with Niggas Don't Give a Fuck, me and Daz, where we introduced the Dog Pound. I think that's the one where Warren G did a record. He produced Tupac. You know what I'm saying? And Tupac's record on the Poetic Justice soundtrack, I think, is Tupac produced by Warren G. On my mama.
by early 1996, Tupac was unstoppable. All Eyes on Me was dominating the charts, Death Row was a fortress at the top of the industry, and Suge Knight's empire was feared across the music world. But outside the studio walls, another battle was raging. Hip-hop's East Coast, West Coast rivalry, once just a lyrical back and forth, was transforming into something darker. And at the very center of that storm stood Tupac Shakur in the West and Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G., in the East. The roots of the feud stretched back to a cold November night in 1994. Tupac was in New York, heading into Quad Studios in Times Square to record a track. Before he even reached the elevator, gunmen ambushed him. 5 shots tore through his body. Miraculously, he survived. When he staggered into the studio bleeding, he saw faces he thought were his friends, including Biggie and Puff Daddy. To Tupac, their shock looked too much like guilt. He became convinced they had known the attack was coming, or at the very least, had withheld the truth. Whether true or not, that belief never left him. In Tupac's mind, betrayal was worse than bullets. When he came out of prison, scarred and angry, and signed with Death Row, that suspicion hardened into rage. Now, backed by Suge's army and flush with fame, Tupac had a megaphone. He didn't just rap about his pain, he weaponized it. The result was Hit 'Em Up. It was one of the most venomous diss records ever recorded. Tupac spat bar after bar aimed directly at Biggie, Puff, Bad Boy Records, and anyone associated with them. He didn't just attack reputations, he attacked lives, even claiming he had slept with Biggie's wife, Faith Evans. It was a nuclear strike, turning personal suspicion into public warfare. The record lit a fuse. Fans debated it endlessly. DJs dropped it in clubs with crowds erupting. Other rappers picked sides. To many, Hit 'Em Up was the point of no return. The media poured gasoline on the flames. Hip-hop magazines plastered East versus West, West across their covers. Journalists hyped it as a civil war for the soul of rap music. News anchors, who barely understood the culture, began to report on it like it was a gang war spilling onto the airwaves. Concerts grew tense. West Coast artists booed in New York. East Coast rappers heckled in Los Angeles. Crews traveled with heavier security, entourages doubling as militias. And at the center of it all was Tupac, fiery, impulsive, magnetic. He leaned into the outlaw role, embracing the chaos as though it confirmed his destiny. He called himself not just a rapper, but a soldier. His interviews dripped with defiance. He told cameras he was ready for whatever came, and that he wasn't scared of death. But the truth was darker. Behind the bravado, friends said he was becoming restless, paranoid, and obsessed with enemies both real and imagined. He wore the feud like armor, but the weight of it was pulling him down. Biggie, for his part, denied any involvement in the 1994 shooting. He insisted he had nothing to do with it, that he had never betrayed Tupac. Puff Daddy echoed the same. But the damage was done. For Tupac, the line had been crossed, and there was no going back. What had started as music, bars traded on wax, egos bruised in rhyme, had spilled into the streets. Crews armed themselves. Gangs aligned with record labels. Threats became real violence. And Death Row, under Suge Knight's heavy hand, only fanned the fire. Suge had no interest in cooling the feud. For him, East versus West wasn't just business. It was personal. A chance to humiliate Bad Boy and stamp Death Row's dominance. Big Gip recalls.
I was one of the first to hear Hit 'Em Up. Me and Lisa Left Eye and the Goody Mob. And to hear it for the first time, it was jaw dropping. You know what I mean? Because I never heard, I heard No Vaseline. I heard, man, I heard disc records, but when, you started off with a bunch of wife, I was just like, Jesus. I was like, that was cold, but then you thinking like, back then everybody like, oh, he just making that shit up. But then 25 years later, folk telling you they seen folk around them. So it's kind of like, okay, then damn near Shawty gave him the recipe to do that song, because you went over there as being Big's wife and you went and messed with this man. So you damn near gave him the fuel to flame that fire.
The feud had become more than rap. It was now part of the culture, part of the streets, and part of Tupac's identity. And the deeper he went, the closer he crept to the edge. By the summer of 1996, Tupac Shakur stood at the peak of his career. All Eyes on Me had gone multi-platinum, selling millions in just months. He was the most recognizable rapper on the planet, the face on magazine covers, the name shouted from every car stereo, the figure whose every move was tracked by fans and journalists alike. But behind the platinum plaques and flashing lights, the cracks were starting to show. Life at death row was as intoxicating as it was dangerous. Tupac lived in a world where music sessions bled into all-night parties, where producers, hustlers, lawyers, and gangsters all rubbed shoulders in the same rooms. The label was a fortress, but it was also a pressure cooker, and Tupac was in the middle of it. The entourages grew larger, the guns more visible, the paranoia sharper. He couldn't walk down a street without bodyguards. He couldn't step into a club without half the room watching his every move. Friends began to notice he was restless, unable to sit still, always on edge, his laughter giving way to sudden silence. In interviews, he projected defiance. He told the world he was ready for death, unafraid of enemies. But privately, he was haunted. Betrayal seemed to circle him. The memory of being shot in New York never left his mind. He wrote constantly about trust, or the lack of it, scribbling thoughts into notebooks, between studio takes, pacing hallways like a man who couldn't find peace. It was during these restless months that Tupac adopted a new persona, Machiavelli. Inspired by Niccolò Machiavelli, the Italian philosopher who wrote about deception, survival, and power, Tupac began to see himself not just as a rapper, but as a strategist, an outlaw reborn. Under the name Machiavelli, his lyrics grew darker, sharper, more prophetic. In August 1996, he recorded the Don Columinati, the 7-Day Theory. The album was finished in just 1 week. A blur of long nights, scattered notes, and raw emotion. The songs sounded like warnings, like visions of what was to come. Hail Mary wasn't just a song. It was a prayer whispered in the dark, laced with threats and prophecy. Against all odds, named his enemies directly, calling them out with fearless specificity, as if daring them to make a move. Every verse dripped with the weight of paranoia and defiance, as though Tupac was documenting his own fate before it arrived. To fans, the Machiavelli project felt revolutionary. To those closest to him, it felt like prophecy, too specific, too heavy, too close to the truth. Meanwhile, the East-West feud only intensified. Bad Boy and Death Row continued trading insults. Concerts turned hostile. Crowds shouted down rival artists. Journalists breathlessly reported on every slight, every rumor, every fight. What had once been about music was now about survival. Tupac, always impulsive, didn't just play into the feud, and he embodied it. He was the West Coast's loudest voice, Suge Knight's most loyal soldier, and the one man who seemed determined to stare down every enemy at once. But the toll was growing. Friends described a man torn between contradictions, generous and warm one moment, fiery and paranoid the next. He poured everything into his music, but even his celebration sounded like warning shots. It was as though he could feel time closing in, each verse an attempt to outpace it.
It just freaked me out because he was moving like he knew he was gonna die. So for him to tell me physically or say verbally or specifically, like, badass, I know my time is short, he never said nothing like that, but I could tell that he knew. When he died, and I looked back on the last 10, 11 months that I spent with him out of his life, he knew he was gonna die. He probably didn't know what day, he probably didn't know, but God might give us that sign, who knows? Things that it takes people, like I said, a lifetime to do, he was doing them in a week.
By late summer, Tupac was moving faster than ever, recording, performing, planning films, writing scripts, dreaming of building his own label, even talking about leaving death row behind to start fresh. But fate wasn't slowing down. It was racing toward him. And the city of Las Vegas would be the stage where it all came to an end. September 7th, 1996, Las Vegas. The city of neon was alive that night. The MGM Grand was the epicenter, where fight fans had gathered to watch Mike Tyson step back into the ring. The fight itself was over in an instant. Bruce Seldon knocked out in less than 2 minutes. The crowd left the arena restless, unsatisfied, but still buzzing with energy. Tupac Shakur sat ringside. He had cheered, laughed, soaked in the spotlight, cameras catching every grin. At 25, he looked untouchable. Dressed sharp, chains glinting, moving through the MGM like a man who owned the night. But fate was waiting for him in the lobby. As the crowd surged, Tupac spotted a figure he recognized instantly, Orlando Anderson. Anderson was a known Crip, accused of robbing one of Death Row's crew months earlier. Tupac didn't hesitate. He lunged, fists flying. His entourage swarmed behind him, stomping and kicking until Anderson crumpled. Tourists screamed. Security guards rushed in. The MGM, a palace of entertainment, turned into chaos. The fight lasted barely a minute, but it would prove to be the most consequential of Tupac's life. Hours later, Tupac climbed into the passenger seat of a black BMW 750 with Suge Knight behind the wheel. They were headed to Club 662, a death row nightclub where Tupac was set to perform later that night. The strip pulsed with traffic. Neon signs reflected off the car's polished frame. Tupac leaned out of the window, smiling, talking to fans, his laughter spilling into the night air. To anyone watching, he looked alive, defiant, unstoppable. But danger was circling. At the intersection of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, a white Cadillac pulled up alongside the BMW. The window slid down. In the flash of a second, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore into the car, shattering glass, punching into metal, ripping into flesh. Tupac was hit 4 times: chest, arm, thigh, and pelvis. Suge, the driver, was grazed in the head by flying shrapnel, but somehow kept control of the wheel. The BMW lurched forward through the intersection, tires squealing, chaos exploding around them. When the shooting stopped, the Cadillac vanished into the night, leaving behind the echo of gunfire and the screams of bystanders. Inside the BMW, Tupac slumped against the seat. Blood soaked his shirt. He gasped for air. Paramedics arrived within minutes, rushing him to University Medical Center. Crowds gathered outside, news cameras already circling like vultures. Inside, surgeons fought to save him. For 6 days, Tupac clung to life, Machines breathed for him, tubes and wires surrounding his battered body. His mother, Afeni Shakur, kept vigil at his bedside. A woman who had once raised him as part of the Black Panther movement, now forced to watch as her son lay broken. Friends came and went, whispering prayers, holding his hand, fearing the inevitable. Reporters camped outside the hospital doors. Fans lit candles in the streets, their radios blasting all eyes on me into the night sky. Rumors flew. Would Tupac pull through? Would he make another miraculous comeback? On September 13, 1996, at 4:03 p.m., the questions ended. Tupac Amaru Shakur was pronounced dead. He was 25 years old, member of the Outlaws. Napoleon recollects.
I wasn't there. So Pac said, okay, from the Outlaws that came with me to New York, y'all not going to come with me to Vegas. So myself, I believe Young Noble, because he was in New York, we stayed. And Castro, he didn't go to New York. He went with him. Edie and Gaddafi also went with him. I just remember leaving Pac crib and Young Noble telling me when I called the crib, he was like, Pac called looking for you. Later on, I found out from, Castro, Gaddafi, and Edie that when Pac had a fight with Orlando Anderson, the first person he called, the first person he told him to call was me, which is strange. They said after Pac fought him, he got in the elevator, was like, call Moo, tell him I just knocked this dude out. And when he called the house, I wasn't there. You know what I mean? So Noah was like, Pac called looking for you. He had a fight with somebody. I just took it like, that's it. He had a fight with somebody. And I was with Carl. Carl is actually the husband of Molly. And what happened was very strange. So when I'm with Carl, the whole time, Pac used to have a 6'2", I think Chevy Impala, blue one. He gifted it to Carl. So I'm with Carl, and the whole time we talking about Pac. He like, man, you don't understand how good of a person this dude is. This was Carl, he got intoxicated. He just said, Pac did this. He gave me this 6'2" as a gift. I always wanted my own Impala, this and this and this and that. We don't know why Pac is going through it. Carl is just for, he's steadily talking about Pac. The whole conversation was about Pac. Then he dropped me back off at the house. When I got to the crib, Noble, came down the hill, was like, yo, we just got a phone call. Pac got shot. And I just remember like, whoa, what? But something inside of me, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid that, it was something that detrimental. I thought he got shot before 5 times. He gonna be good. So eventually we got in the car with Yasmin, which is Gaddafi's mother. We filled the car, her trunk up with guns, and we drove to Vegas, which was 3 hours. From Los Angeles, 3.5 hours. So when we got to LA, we went to the hotel, we sat with his moms. We didn't go to the hospital yet, We sat up with the Outlaws. Everybody was out of it, especially Gaddafi. And we was like, what happened? And they started explaining what happened. Pac got into a fight with a dude. We was going our way to 662 Sugar Club, and the car just pulled up, and Gaddafi's like, all I remember seeing a black arm, an arm of a dark colored person come out the window and just start letting off. Gaddafi was like he knew what it was. As soon as he seen the arm come out the window, he knew what it was. And unfortunately, he couldn't do nothing. You know what I mean? And I guess the car pulled off. Some people say bunchering them. They followed the car, bunchering them, shot back at the car, but the car got away. So, Pac had some surgeries. We went to the hotel after that. We decided, for some reason, there was no security. For some reason, I don't know why they put Tupac on the first floor of the hospital. His window literally was in the back of the hospital on the first floor, meaning that if word get out that Pac is there, anybody can do something, because people was calling the hospital like, we coming back to finish him off. So we was getting death threats. Pac was getting death threats. So what we did was like, shout out to Gobi. We met with Gobi. Gobi had a van, I remember. And all of the Outlaws, we like, look, there's not enough security here for Pac. We just got to step it up. So we parked the van right behind his window, And we had shifts. 3-4 outlaws will be there from like 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. We won't sleep. We just watching every car, everybody that walk by, because you had so many cars coming, so many fans walking around, and we watching every movement. That shift, the homies will go to the hotel. The next shift will come. And we remember we just did this. And we were saying to ourselves, man, wait till Pac, come out of the hospital. He's going to be proud of us. Because it was the first time that we was kids around Pac, and we always used to make a lot of mistakes. And he's always be like, man, I'm trying to put y'all up on game and y'all not listening, this and this. So that was the time we was like, man, when Pac come out this hotel, sorry about that. When Pac come out of this hospital and he hear how we held it down, he gonna be proud of us. I think even Storm was there. Storm, the female outlaw. I think she was there with us, you know what I mean? And Whack Deuce. And we was there, man. And just waiting, hoping that we're gonna get, the word, the good word that he's better, and he's coming home. But unfortunately, his situation turned to the worse, and his mother felt that the proper thing for her is to let him go. And that feeling, bro, you know what I mean? That was one of the worst things, one of the worst news that I ever heard, that he's no longer with us.
The strip that had glowed so brightly that night felt muted in the days that followed. Las Vegas, a city built on spectacle, had just hosted one of the darkest moments in music history, and hip-hop would never be the same again. When the news broke on September 13th, 1996, the world stood still. Radio stations interrupted broadcasts. News anchors delivered the story with disbelief, some stumbling over his name, as if they couldn't believe the words they were reading. Crowds gathered outside hospitals, record stores, and street corners. In Los Angeles, candles were lit on sidewalks, murals painted overnight on brick walls, Tupac's face appearing as if by magic across the city. Cars rolled slowly through neighborhoods, his music blasting from open windows. Life goes on, I get around, Hail Mary. For millions, this was how they mourned, with his voice echoing through the streets, defiant even in death. But almost as quickly as the grief came the questions. Who killed Tupac Shakur? The police pointed to Orlando Anderson, the man beaten in the MGM lobby just hours before the shooting. On paper, it made sense. The fight, the retaliation, the gunfire. But Anderson denied involvement, and no charges were ever brought. Others whispered of East Coast connections, the Bad Boy Camp, Puff Daddy, Biggie. Whether they had pulled the trigger or not, the media framed them as suspects in the court of public opinion. The feud had become so explosive that fans were ready to believe anyone on the other side might have been involved. Still others looked closer to home. Death Row itself was a nest of rivalries and suspicion. Suge Knight's power was growing, but so was the list of enemies circling around him. Some wondered if Tupac's death was the result of betrayal from within, a silencing before he could leave the label and build his own empire. And then there were the wildest theories, the ones that still echo today, that the FBI or government had been watching Tupac, fearing his growing influence as a black activist, that Suge himself had orchestrated the hit, or that Tupac hadn't died at all, that he had staged the entire thing, slipping away into exile, leaving only his music as proof he had ever been here. Conspiracy theories multiplied, feeding the legend. Sightings popped up in Cuba, in Jamaica, in small towns across America. Fans dissected lyrics, searching for hidden codes, listening for prophecy. The Machiavelli album, released after his death, only fueled the speculation. He had rapped about betrayal, about death, about resurrection. To some, it sounded less like art and more like confession. But behind the rumors and whispers was a simple, brutal fact. Tupac Shakur was gone. Sway talks about the impact of Tupac's life and death.
That day was a Friday, and the reason why I know this is because we were scheduled to run the interview on 106 KMEL, and we were going to run this special, Tupac special. He died on the 13th, but he was shot days prior. So if you recall, he was, in the hospital, and we heard a lung collapse, then we heard he wasn't going to make it, then we heard, nah, he's still with us. Pac, he's strong. Everybody thought he was going to make it. We knew he'd be damaged, but we were for certain, he's going to pull through. That's Pac, man. It's Pac. Come on, man. Dude already been shot, walked out the hospital. That's Pac, man. He's our hero. Pac was an action figure to young black men coming out of the Bay. I was at the radio station. We were prepping the show, I believe, and found out that he passed away. And it was like a black cloud that weighed like a quilt, and it was smothering. It was like humidity everywhere. And I just started playing back the hands of time, like trying to reverse time. Like, wait, hold on, this can't be right. No, hold up, it's going to be better after. You know how you think, it's going to be better. Give me a second. Let me think about this. It's going to be better. He's not, and every time I open my eyes, it's like, nah, nothing's changed. And he died? What do you mean he died? We ran the show that night, or that interview. And so that interview became, just a collector's item, and that's one of the reasons why I never listened to it from beginning to end. I never listened to it. Like, I couldn't sit and listen to it. We played clips before. When we played the clips, I turned it down. It's hard to hear my voice next to his like that, and remembering, like yesterday, what his energy was like. This was a man full of he had so much energy, so much charisma. He cared so much about people. He had a flip side to him too. He played hard. He worked hard. He played hard. He got to experience things. I think he wanted us to live vicariously through him. It's hard to be the top of the food chain, when you're in the rap game, in the music business. He was a brilliant person. The fact that 20 years later, we talk about him like it just happened, and you can look at me looking at me sad as 20 years later is indicative of the mark, the impression he left on our lives.
Today, his name still sparks debate. Was he a genius undone by his own recklessness, or a victim of forces larger than himself? Was he the greatest rapper to ever live, or a warning of what happens when talent and chaos collide? Perhaps he was all of these things. What is undeniable is this: Tupac changed music forever. He changed culture forever. And though his life ended in violence, his voice refuses to be silenced. From prison gates to platinum plaques, from East Coast rivalries to the streets of Las Vegas, Tupac's story is one of brilliance, chaos, and legend. This has been the Hip Hop Files, Tupac, Part 2. If you've been listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, hit that follow button, drop us a 5-star rating, and share this episode. It helps us keep these stories alive. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe to both our channels, the Hip Hop Files Podcast and the Hip Hop Files. And leave a comment below. Tell us your favorite Tupac track or what his music means to you. Next week, we turn to the other side of this story. Christopher Wallace, Biggie Smalls, the notorious B.I.G. Part 1, the King of Brooklyn, the rival, the friend turned enemy. Don't miss it.